what else needs to be said? In this episode of Then and Now, we'll go over the humble beginnings as a comic series by Kevin Eastman and Peter Laird to the various incarnations over the years. Both good and Michael Bay. This will not be a detailed analysis of each, but it will get my biased opinions from what I've seen. Now, if you want a more in-depth history about the beginnings and how the Turtles came to be, then check out the Turtle Power documentary, which has both Eastman and Laird giving their sides of the story. Eastman and Laird's original TMNT Mirage Studios comic was first released in 1984. The famous issue number 1 introduced the main characters as well as the iconic villain Shredder. Issue number 2 introduced April O'Neil and the popular villain Baxter Stockman. Another popular character, Casey Jones, would not be introduced until the one-off issue Raphael number 1. The original concepts, while renowned today for the dark and gritty atmosphere compared to the later publications, were actually a parody of graphic novels at the time, especially those by Frank Miller. The first run for issue number 1 only printed about 3,000 copies, which were quickly bought by many investors hoping the comic would be successful and spike in value, which they were right. And within months, the original first run comic sold at 50 times their value. Thanks to the unexpected success, Eastman and Laird would find themselves as no longer comic book artists, but overseers of a merchandising juggernaut. As the comics were black and white, their trademark colors that identify each turtle didn't arrive until the toy line in the '87 cartoon. While the cartoon was pretty much a Saturday morning advertisement for the toys, like all the other stuff was back then, the show was the first exposure for many children to the Ninja Turtles franchise. While retaining the Turtles, Master Splinter, Shredder, and the Foot Clan, the show also introduced popular characters like Krang, Bebop, and Rocksteady. But instead of the dark and gritty anti-hero tone of the comics, the bright and colorful show emphasized a lot more humor. So the Turtles were wisecracking, pizza-obsessed superheroes. Whereas the comics had intense fighting and the Turtles killing off common enemies, the Foot Soldiers were changed into robots so that a high number of them could be destroyed without anybody dying, which is something that parents did not want their kids seeing at the time. Phrases like cowabunga were also synonymous with the TV show, and would become staples with the franchise later on. The original creators reportedly were not the biggest fans of the cartoon due to it being very different from the comics. But Peter Laird did acknowledge its success, and he did see that it opened a lot of people to become fans of his creation. As the 80s closed out with a plethora of comics, toys, and video games, the Turtles could do no wrong as they rose into prominence. The early 90s is of course when the Turtles are at their peak. You couldn't get away from them. But the downfall as the decade progressed is something to ponder at. The popularity led to the 1990 movie, which to this day is arguably considered the best Ninja Turtles movie. The film's tagline,
"Hey dude, this is no cartoon,"
made it clear that this movie would not be what children at the time expected. The filmmakers took what they felt worked from the comics and what from the cartoon could be used. So it loosely followed the comics backstory, but the main characters were still familiar to the kids watching. It was dark and brooding, a little violent. The Turtles talk more like adults.
Ninja kick the damn rabbit!
Damn! And of course, it included Casey Jones kicking Foot Clan ass. It was the definitive Turtles movie. The puppeteer and animatronic work by Jim Henson is top-notch. And even for 4 guys in bulky costume, the martial arts is still fun to watch. Anytime I saw this movie as a kid, I loved it. And to this day, I still feel like the movie holds up well, despite being clearly outdated. Pretty much the 80s refusing to die and the 90s just coming in. Yeah, it could still be on the corny side, but that's what's to be expected with anything about 4 crime-fighting reptiles. This movie just had enough corniness, and nothing like what was to follow. Later that year, the Ninja Turtles embarked on that infamous concert production, the Coming Out of Their Shells tour, with the Turtles now being turned into a rock band and performing a stage show. Yes, this has to be checked out to be believed. It was simply a sign of the times. It was a time when the Turtles franchise was so big that as long as kids kept wanting it, they were willing to slap the Turtles' name on anything. More toys! More games! More food tie-in! Let's add a theme park attraction complete with unimpressed audience reactions. And let's not forget about the PSA for LA Metro lines. Wait, what? The success of the 1990 movie led to the release of the sequel in 91, titled The Search for More Money. The Secret of the Ooze. With a bigger budget, the sequel could have been better, right? Well, due to a bunch of parents whining and complaining, the movie watered down the violence and intensity from the first movie, everything that made it good. It wasn't as dark, the jokes were cornier, and the Turtles didn't really use their weapons. Nope, can't use your katanas or nunchucks, but it's okay to whack a bad guy with yo-yos and salami. Oh, and no Casey Jones? Why? Whereas the first movie was more like the comics, this one was definitely more like the cartoon. It was safe and marketable. They were Batman Forevering the film series before that became a thing. But of course, we still remember the Secret of the Ooze for the fight scene with Vanilla Ice in the background. And Super Shredder going out like a little bitch. I mean, if a regular Shredder can survive a 7-story fall and being crushed by a garbage compactor, why wouldn't Super Shredder survive a dock falling on him? Just saying. Sorry, Kevin Nash, you got jobbed. Nowadays, I still enjoy the second movie for what it is, but it's definitely one of those so bad it's good movies. The Turtles franchise was still going strong until the third movie came out. I remember as a 6-year-old kid in 1993 not caring for the third movie that much. I could clearly tell then that something was off, and that time travel to feudal Japan didn't really help for me. Even the costumes and animatronics looked terrible, thanks to them not being handled by Jim Henson's shop anymore. Don't know why. I remember thinking the movie was boring when you compare it to the other two. I know Ninja Turtles 3 has its defenders, and I'll even admit I still laugh at the scenes with Casey Jones trying to teach the samurai modern technology and hockey.
Just like you saw on TV?
Yeah, hockey da.
Hockeyのことがあったっけ? Okay, I can work with that.
But not only is it clearly the worst of the Ninja Turtles films, it was a huge sign of decline for the Turtles franchise. By the mid-1990s, the cartoon series was declining in quality and viewers. The second volume of the original Mirage series was canceled due to sagging sales. Arguably, thanks to the third movie, the Turtles stopped being cool. So, not even the home video releases of Turtle Tunes and We Wish You a Turtle Christmas could have saved what was to happen next. Being just the ripe age of 7, just within the target age, once the Power Rangers got on TV, it was like, Turtles who? They truly were the successor at the time. And the Turtles were forced to take a back seat while the Rangers were given a major push. Those who did keep watching the original cartoon did see it make radical changes in the final 3 seasons, being more serious and a little darker in tone. Fans call these seasons the Red Sky episodes. After the cartoon series ended in '96, kids watching on Fox Kids saw a live-action TV series in '97, The Next Mutation. The show was made to be an adaptation of the movies with a few major changes, most notably a female turtle named Venus de Milo, who was supposed to be from the same batch that the original Turtles were in. Besides the absence of Casey and April, the Turtles were changed into not being blood relatives, so that them having crushes on Venus wouldn't be weird. The way the show was formatted made it feel like a Power Rangers knockoff, and it didn't help that this incarnation appeared in a crossover episode with the freaking Power Rangers. But The Next Mutation only lasted for a season before being cancelled due to ratings not being good enough. Rumor has it that Peter Laird hates the female turtles so much that you're not even allowed to joke about it with him. Apparently, he hates it that much. But the major point is, the Turtles franchise started the 1990s with a bang, but by 1999, the franchise was clearly ending the decade a shell of its former self. No pun intended. Well, maybe there was. Unless you were told or you had kept up with things, chances are you had no idea what was going on with the Turtles. And you probably forgot which color bandana each turtle wore. Starting in the year 2000, Kevin Eastman and Peter Laird began to go their separate ways, with Laird and Mirage buying out Eastman's ownership of the property, which reportedly was completed by 2008. Eastman just began working on other projects, most notably on Tundra Publishing and Heavy Metal Magazine, while Laird would continue being more hands-on with the Turtles franchise going forward. I remember around this time, the Turtles felt like a nostalgia act. The original cartoon could only be seen if you had the tapes, and the video games were still enjoyable if you had the systems, or figured out how to do emulation. Since I wasn't into comics, I wasn't aware of the Mirage series still going on with a fourth volume that completely discarded the third volume beginning in 01. A new cartoon series was produced in 2003. This time, Peter Laird was more hands-on with the series, compared to him having less of an impact with the prior efforts. Thanks to it being co-produced by Mirage Studios, their significant influence resulted in a cartoon that resembled the original comics with a dark and edgier tone, but still retained enough humor and lightheartedness to be suitable for kids watching it on 4Kids. Except for Mikey, the Turtles weren't as wisecracking as before, and rather than being typical damsel in distress, April O'Neil became skilled in ninjutsu herself, and the series culminates with her marrying Casey Jones in the finale. While I myself didn't follow this cartoon, my nephew did and he enjoyed it, and from what I did see, I was happy with it. This was the Turtles for a new generation after all, and it brought more toys and video games into the mix, once more bringing the franchise back into relevancy. In 2007, a new film simply titled TMNT was released. This was the first and only Turtles film to be completely computer animated. Aside from the CGI, they wanted to make a movie more mature than the old trilogy and going for a look and feel of the comics. Sounds great on paper, right? Well, the 2007 movie had a lot of fun action scenes and great animation, but they suffered from a not very good plot. When you try to get into the story and the characters, you literally come in thinking, was there a movie I missed? The first two acts of the movie tried too hard to be like the dark, brooding superhero movies being done at the time, which is great for Batman, but not Ninja Turtles. It's not a bad movie by any means, it just felt like an experiment gone wrong. You gotta think, what is a worse fate? Being a bad movie that people still remember, or being an okay movie that's hardly memorable? Because the 2007 movie lacks any charm, I forget it exists sometimes. In 2009, to celebrate the 20th anniversary of the franchise, Turtles Forever was released as a TV movie special. Making it the true finale of the 2003 series, it's centered around the 2003 Turtles running into their 87 counterparts from a different universe and teaming up with them. Of course, the best parts are when the original 1984 Mirage comics make an appearance and prove once and for all they were the greatest. And thank goodness this wasn't one of those crossovers that turned into a drug PSA. A lot of naysayers for Turtles Forever felt the 1987 Turtles were shat on due to them being more goofy than they actually were in the old show.
Any idea what we should do next?
I know.
Other than going out for a slice?
I told you can't brainstorm with these goofballs. They ain't got no brains.
Hey, we resemble that remark.
Thus, this movie felt like an ominous message of, the new show is better. Co-creator Peter Laird, who did the character writing for this movie, did this on purpose, to poke fun at the approach of the old cartoon, versus the way he and Eastman wanted the 87 series to be. Reportedly, this was one final screw you to the countless fans of the 80s show complaining and demanding they make the 2003 show like the old. What also sucks is that due to union rules, the 87 voice actors couldn't get hired to reprise their roles. And no Uncle Phil voicing the 87 Shredder. But as a 25th anniversary celebration, I did feel it did its job well. I personally enjoyed it for what it was, but I get why a lot of old fans didn't like it. The 2000s began with the Turtles in obscurity, but the decade was closed with them back in pop culture, having withstood the test of time. Nickelodeon had purchased the rights to Mirage in 2009. While Peter Laird continues to have the rights to publish from Mirage, his work in each new issue after the acquisition has been done much more sporadically, with the last issue being released in 2014. His future with the Turtles and Mirage is still uncertain at this point. On the other hand, in 2011, IDW Publishing announced they had the rights to release new Turtles comics, plus re-release all the old Mirage comics. Along with this change came the return of Kevin Eastman, who has both written and handled art chores for the ongoing IDW comic series ever since. It's kind of confusing when you think about the two co-creators working on different publishers for the Turtles, but it is what it is. In 2012, Nickelodeon began releasing a CGI series, having more of an anime feel, while at the same time having the main cast look and act younger than previously seen. Even April and Casey are teenagers rather than being adult allies. And once again, many purists didn't like the change, but the show was still very popular at Nickelodeon, running for 5 seasons and exposing another generation to the Turtles. I remember kids loving this show, so who was I to complain if it wasn't like the previous shows? Skipping ahead to 2018, a new 2D animated series on Nickelodeon titled Rise of the Ninja Turtles began to be released, with yet another cool animation design. This is another reinvention of the series, with Raphael taking the place of Leonardo as the leader, and April O'Neil being African American. Compared to the other series, it's also meant to be more humorous and lighthearted. And while the series is still fresh, it is still a hit with viewers on Nickelodeon, and the show is still being produced in its second season as of this video. In 2014, after so many years being away from the big screen, bullshit! We got another live-action Turtles movie released. But it was produced by Nickelodeon and Michael Bay. While the human characters are live-action, the Turtles are CGI, and yeah, they look awful. You would think that with all the money spent, they would look less like the annoying orange effects. Now, Megan Fox plays April O'Neil, and honestly, she isn't that bad. Having her save the Turtles is a nice touch. The main problem about this movie, besides being dull, it looks and feels like a Michael Bay Transformers movie featuring the Ninja Turtles. You could intersplice this with any of the Transformers movies and not know which one was which. With that said, it does have its moments, especially the elevator scene. The action scenes are still fun, so it's not the worst of the bunch, but do I think it's a good movie? Nah. I went in expecting the 2016 sequel to suck, but I was actually impressed that I enjoyed it. Out of the Shadows has its share of problems, no doubt. The film attempts to give the fans what we've always wanted, like Baxter, Krang, Bebop and Rocksteady, the Technodrome, all these things we wanted from the cartoon that we wanted in the old trilogy of movies was finally getting on the big screen. Whereas the 2014 movie felt like an actual movie with a long drawn-out story, Out of the Shadows never really takes a break from constantly throwing crap at you. It's paced faster. It feels much more like a 30-year-old tribute to the original cartoon. In some ways, that makes the sequel more fun and awesome. But I can see why many people felt like it was just fan service with no weight. And they screwed up Casey Jones, big time.
That's Officer Jones.
They made him a clean-cut cop, pretty much the opposite of everything he was. Still, I think the movie is an improvement, but that's not saying much. But because the sequel didn't make as much money as expected, they canceled on making a third movie, and it was announced in 2018 that they plan to reboot the movie series again with Michael Bay producing. Can we just not have Michael Bay getting anywhere near it, please?
Oh, he's not the director, he's producing it, blah blah blah.
It is obvious his fingerprints are all over these movies, and they try too hard to not only give the fans what they think they wanted, but also kept the movie safe and marketable. Hey, you gotta have that Pizza Hut promotion after all.
Sellouts.
But nearly 30 years later, the original 1990 movie and the 2003 cartoon series remain as the closest to the original vision of the comics. But I don't think we'll ever get a film or TV series that is 100% the essence of what makes the Turtles awesome. Still, the franchise in multiple forms has resonated with so many fans over the years, and it shows no sign of stopping. What will be the next TV series? What will be the next movie be like? Will it suck? As we approach the 2020s, we can only wait and see.
Hey, dude, there's this totally awesome man I know.
Who is that, Leo?
You all call him Desert Coyote.
Oh, I should totally subscribe.
Hey, you know what else would be totally radical?
No?
If you get your parents' permission and send him a spare dollar your way. Hey, he spends hours writing and editing videos for your enjoyment. You should totally show him some love. It would go a long way.
How do I do that, Leo?
Why, PayPal, of course. Just click the links in the description. Cowabunga! Don't do drugs, kid.